Hello and welcome to K News. This is Hardik Trivedi. Let's have a look what is happening in India and in the world. Australia recorded its deadliest day of the pandemic on Monday as the government urged hotspot Victoria State to announce its plans to lift the lockdown on the country's second largest city. Victoria's health department reported 41 deaths from COVID-19 and 73 new infections in the latest 24-hour period. While the deaths were a state and national high, the tally of new infections was Victoria's lowest since 67 new cases were recorded on June 30 in the early weeks of the second wave of the pandemic, which has primarily been concentrated in the state capital, Melbourne. In a 6-week lockdown in the city is due to be relaxed on September 13, but the state government has not said how it will be relaxed or given any assurances that it won't be extended. Victoria has recorded more than 19,000 infections with the coronavirus, almost 80% of Australia's more than 25,000 cases, according to a tally from Johns Hopkins University. The state also accounts for the vast majority of Australia's more than 650 deaths. The head of Lebanon's Hezbollah said on Sunday his group supports the formation of a government that would be able to improve economic conditions in the crisis-stricken country and undertake major reforms. Hassan Nasrallah said his group is also open to calls from France for a new political contract in Lebanon on condition that all Lebanese sects are on board. The speech came on the eve of a meeting of Lebanese parliamentary blocs deciding to name a new prime minister, and also ahead of French President Emmanuel Macron's arrival in the Lebanon's late Monday. It's Macron's second visit to the former French protectorate in less than a month. Macron has offered French support after the devastating August 4 port explosion in Beirut, and also pressed Lebanese officials to formulate a new political pact to lift the country out of its political stalemates, entrenched corruption, and years of mismanagement. Meanwhile, Lebanon named its envoy to Germany, Mustafa Adib, as the new premier Monday to steer the country through a deep crisis after the Beirut explosion compounded a sharp economic downturn. The presidency made the announcement in a televised statement as Adib arrived at the palace in Babda near Beirut to meet President Michael Aoun. Open source satellite imagery has captured what appears to be a helipad China is building in close proximity of two new air defense positions that cover sensitive stretches of the disputed border in Doklam and Sikkim sectors. The imagery shared by the open source intelligence analyst who uses the name @Destrefa on Twitter shows the suspected helipad under construction at the tri-junction of the borders of India, Bhutan and China at a distance of about 100 kilometers from Dokala and Nakula. The suspected helipad is located almost equidistant from the two sites at which the PLA is developing surface-to-air missile facilities. According to imagery tweeted earlier by Detresfa, both the missiles facilities are near what have been described as suspected early warning radar sites opposite Sikkim state. In a graphic posted on Twitter, Detresfa said the steady build-up of support infrastructure by the PLA near areas demonstrates that long-term Chinese ambitions in these sectors. With the addition of a helipad, China would be able to sustain all-weather operations in the disputed areas regardless of the harsh terrain conditions. according to the graphic. The new missile facilities are located roughly 50 kilometers from Nakula, where troops from the two countries had clashed on May 9, and Dokala, close to the Dokam Plateau, that was the scene of 73-day military standoff between India and China in 2017. There was no immediate reaction from Indian officials to the reported development of the heliport and the missile sites by the Chinese. China on Monday said its troops strictly abide by the LAC with India, refuting the Indian Army statement that said the Chinese armed forces had carried out provocative military actions on the southern banks of the Pangong TSO. Responding to a question on the Indian Army statement, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said the troops of the People Liberation Army never crossed the line. Chinese border troops always strictly abide by the LAC. They never cross the line. Border troops on the two sides have been in close communication regarding the issues on the ground, Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said. Earlier in the day, the Indian Army accused Chinese soldiers of trying to alter the status quo. The statement said Indian troops had been able to preempt the PLA from trying to change the facts on the ground. A brigade commander level flag meeting is said to be in progress at Chushul to resolve the issues on the ground. There have been several meetings between the two sides to disengage after border troops clashed in Galwan Valley on June 15, which led to casualties on both sides. Chinese troops have been slow to pull back, particularly around Pangong TSO, the saltwater glacier lake spread across 700 square kilometers. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe told US President Donald Trump that the strengthening of the two nations alliance would be maintained even after Abe's departure from office, a Japanese government spokesperson said on Monday. Abe announced on Friday he was resigning because of poor health, his long-running battle with ulcerative colitis ending his tenure as Japan's longest-serving prime minister. He wants President Trump to rest assured because the policy of bolstering the Japan-US alliance will remain unchanged. Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary Akihiro Nishimura said. Nishimura was speaking to reporters after a 30-minute telephone call between Abe and Trump early on Monday in Japan. Trump called Abe the greatest prime minister in Japan's history, according to a White House spokesman. Abe told Trump that Japan would like to cooperate closely with the United States as it develops a new missile defense strategy, Nishimura said. Japan in July took a step towards acquiring weapons that can strike North Korea after a ruling party committee approved proposals to consider acquiring strike capability to halt ballistic missile attacks. Pranab Mukherjee, India's former president and one of the country's most admired political leaders, died today. He was 84. Mukherjee had suffered a fall at his Rajaji Marg house and had been operated to remove a blood clot in his brain on August 10. Doctors on Monday morning warned that there was a decline in his condition and he was in septic shock due to infection in his lungs. Later in the afternoon, his son Abhijit Mukherjee made the announcement. A quintessential congressman for 5 decades, the 7-time parliamentarian had worked as a teacher and journalist before taking his first steps in politics. His first stop in Delhi was the Rajya Sabha in 1969, the house that re-elected him for more years before he won his first Lok Sabha election from Bengal's Jangipur in 2004. He was re-elected in 2009. Mukherjee, who has who was seen as a formidable political strategist, draftsman, and parliamentarian with an astute legal mind, prospered in Delhi. He first made it to Indira Gandhi's Council of Ministers in 1972 and never looked back, going on to hold some of the most powerful portfolios: finance, commerce, external affairs, and defense in Congress governments. Pranab Mukherjee was considered the sharpest mind and the prime troubleshooter in the government led by Manmohan Singh, who he had appointed in RBI governor in 1980s. His last stop in public life was Rashtrapati Bhavan. Mukherjee, a nominee of the Congress-led UPA coalition, was elected India's president in 2012. By the time he exited Rashtrapati Bhavan in 2017, he left the legacy of a president who spoke his mind to the government and yet kept the brigades and friendships intact. It's time for a short break. We'll join you in a short while.
जी मामा, बस अभी पहुंची हूँ। पता नहीं इतने दिनों में घर का क्या हाल होगा। आई डोंट बिलीव दिस। तुमने फिर से
जो देखे वो दीवाना।
Welcome back to K News and thank you for watching. Let's continue the streak of news. Domestic stock markets gave up all the day's gains in a volatile session on Monday as investors' focus shifted to a flare-up between India and China on the border from the rising cases of COVID-19. The S&P BSE Sensex index tanked 1,614 points from an intraday high of 40,010 to fall below 39,000 mark, and the NSE Nifty 50 benchmark touched an intraday low of 11,325 at the weakest level of the day. The Sensex ended at 38,628, down 839 points from its previous close, and the Nifty closed 260 points lower at 11,387. The markets erased intraday gains after the government said Chinese troops carried out provocative military movements to change the status quo near Pangong TSO Lake on Saturday night, but they were blocked by Indian soldiers. Investors also booked profits as they awaited official data on India's GDP due. Reports suggest that the country's GDP growth would be worst among the G20 nations. India's gross domestic product or GDP contracted 23.9% in the April-June period, official data showed today. That marked the worst incidence of negative growth for the economy since 1996. The suspension of scheduled international passenger flights has been extended till September 30, said Indian aviation regulator DGCA on Monday. However, international scheduled flights may be allowed on selected routes by the competent authority on a case-to-case basis, noted the Directorate General of Civil Aviation in a circular. Scheduled international passenger services continue to remain suspended in India since March 23 due to the coronavirus pandemic. Meanwhile, special international flights have been operating under the Vande Bharat mission since May and under bilateral air bubble agreements with other countries since July. The circular said the suspension does not affect the operation of international all-cargo operations and flights specifically approved by the DGCA. Lawyer activist Prashant Bhushan held guilty of contempt of his tweets criticizing Chief Justice of India S.A. Bobde and the Supreme Court has been fined 1 rupee by the top court. If he doesn't pay the fine by September 15, he can face jail for 3 months and a ban from practicing in the Supreme Court for 3 years. Freedom of speech cannot be curtailed, said the Supreme Court while handing down the sentence, referring to sane advice from Attorney General K.K. Venugopal to the court and the Prashant Bhushan. Prashant Bhushan, photographed holding up a 1 rupee coin, announced at a press conference, "I propose to submit to the order and respectfully pay the fine." He said he had always believed the Supreme Court is the last bastion for hope for the weak and oppressed, and that he never intended to hurt the judiciary, but wanted to express his anguish on a deviation of its record. The Supreme Court, which had asked for an unconditional apology from the lawyer, noted we gave several opportunities and encouragements to Prashant Bhushan to express regret. He not only gave wide publicity to the second statement but also gave various interviews to press. The court was apparently referring to Prashant Bhushan's statement, refusing to retract his comments or apologize, saying he considered it discharge of his highest duty and apologizing would be contempt of his conscience and the court. Mr. Bhushan had also said that open criticism was necessary to safeguard the democracy and its values. India's gross domestic product or GDP contracted 23.9% in the April-June period, official data showed today, as the coronavirus pandemic induced disruptions hurt businesses and livelihoods despite monetary and fiscal support of rupees 21 lakh crore. That marked the worst incidence of negative growth for the economy since 1996, when India began publishing quarterly figures, and also the worst among major Asian economies. Today's reading, which fully captures the impact of the coronavirus crisis on economic and business activity, is in stark contrast with expansion of 3.1% in the previous quarter and 5.2% in the quarter ended June 30, 2019. Today's data marks the likely onset of India's deepest recession on record, which is widely expected to run through the second half of the fiscal year, as the rapid spread of the pandemic continues to weigh on demand, hindering a pickup in economic activity. Typically, recession is defined as 2 consecutive quarters of decreasing GDP. Economists in a poll by Bloomberg has expected contraction in the June quarter to be in the range of 15 to 25.9%, with a median estimate of 19.2%. COVID-19 is spreading faster in India than anywhere else in the world, as daily tallies have exceeded those of the US and Brazil for almost 2 weeks. India currently has more than 3.54 million cases and 63,000 deaths. Before the pandemic, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's administration was aiming at transforming India from a 2.8 trillion economy into 5 trillion one by 2024, despite slowing growth and low demand. The Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has condoled the passing away of former President Bharat Ratna Shri Pranab Mukherjee. The Prime Minister said India grieves the passing away of Bharat Ratna Shri Pranab Mukherjee. He has left an indelible mark on the development trajectory of our nation, a scholar par excellence, a towering statesman. He was admired across the political spectrum and by all the sections of the society. During his political career that spanned decades, Shri Pranab Mukherjee made long-lasting contributions in the key economic and strategic ministries. He was an outstanding parliamentarian, always well prepared, extremely articulate, as well as witty. As India's president, Shri Pranab Mukherjee made Rashtrapati Bhavan even more accessible to common citizens. He made the President's House a center of learning, innovation, culture, science and literature. His wise counsel on key policy matters will never be forgotten by me. I was new to Delhi in 2014. From day one, I was blessed to have the guidance, support and blessings of Shri Pranab Mukherjee. I will always cherish my interactions with him. Condolences to his family, friends, admirers and supporters across India. Providing further boost to the Make in India initiative of Government India in defense sector. Acquisition wing of Ministry of Defence has today signed contracts with Messrs. Bharat Earth Movers Limited, Messrs. Tata Power Company Limited and Messrs. Larsen and Toubro for supply of 6 Pinaka regiments to the Regiment of Artillery of the Indian Army at an approximate cost of rupees 2,580 crores. These 6 Pinaka regiments comprise 114 launchers with automated gun aiming and positioning system and 45 command posts to be procured from Messrs. TPCL and Messrs. L&T and 330 vehicles to be procured from Messrs. BEML. These 6 Pinaka regiments will operationalized along the northern and eastern borders of the country, further enhancing the operation preparedness of our armed forces. Induction of 6 Pinaka regiments is planned to be completed by 2024. This project under Buy Indian categorization with 70% indigenous content has been approved by Raksha Mantri Shri Rajnath Singh and Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. The Pinaka multiple launch rocket system has been indigenously designed and developed by DRDO and productionalized by the above mentioned defense industries. This is a flagship project showcasing public-private partnership under the aegis of Government India, enabling Atmanirbharta in cutting-edge defense technologies. Gautam Adani's Adani Group said on Monday that it will acquire GVK Group's stake in Mumbai Airport, thus becoming the country's largest private airport operator. Adani Group will have 74% stake in Mumbai's Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj International Airport, post the stake purchase transaction, with 50.5% being bought from GVK Group and 23.5% from minority partners including Airports Company South Africa and Bidvest Group. Adani Airports Holding Limited, the holding company of Adani Group for its airports business and a subsidiary of Adani Enterprises Limited, has entered into an agreement to acquire the debt of GVK Airport Developers Limited. Adani Enterprises said in a regulatory filing. Adani Group already has 6 airports under his belt, having won bids to run 6 airport authority-built non-metro airports in Lucknow, Jaipur, Guwahati, Ahmedabad, Thiruvananthapuram and Mangalore. The other private operator GMR Group handles the Delhi and Hyderabad airports. GVK is holding company through which GVK Group holds 50.5% equity stake in Mumbai International Airport Limited, which in turn holds 74% stake in Navi Mumbai International Airport Limited. The Reserve Bank of India announced the additional special open market operation on Monday of government securities worth rupees 20,000 crores in two tranches of 10,000 crores each. In measure to foster orderly market conditions, RBI will conduct additional special open market operation involving simultaneous purchase and sale of government securities for an aggregate amount of 20,000 crores in two tranches of 10,000 crores each, the central bank said in a statement. The auctions would be conducted on September 10 and September 17. The RBI will also conduct term repo operations for an aggregate amount of 1 lakh crores at floating rates, that is, at the prevailing repo rate in the middle of September to assuage pressures on the market on account of advance tax outflows. With the heightening of COVID-19 pandemic risk, certain financial market segments have been experiencing a tightening of financial conditions, as reflected in the hardening of yields and widening of spreads. The RBI has been constantly reviewing current and evolving liquidity and market conditions. The RBI remains committed to use all instruments at its command to revive the economy by maintaining congenial financial conditions, mitigate the impact of COVID-19 and restore the economy to a path of sustainable growth while preserving macroeconomic and financial stability, RBI said.